Silent Shadow. Kasha Winter had spent her life avoiding the stories of the lost king buried beneath the valley. But when she stepped into the ruins and found her name etched into stone older than time, the air thickened. The walls sighed. And then, from the darkness, he stepped forward golden-eyed, unreadable. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured. "But now, you must see it through." Chapter 1. The Whisper of Forgotten Stones. The late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows from the gnarled oaks that guarded the entrance to Hollowfong Valley. Kasha Winter, her silver hair pulled back in a practical braid, traced the worn inscription on the crumbling stone marker with a gloved finger. Hollowfong. The name itself felt like a forgotten prayer, a rustle of dry leaves in the wind, a secret best left undisturbed. At 62, Kasha had learned the value of leaving secrets buried. But some, it seemed, had a way of clawing their way back to the surface. She'd spent her life in Oakhaven, a town that thrived on the periphery of the valley, always aware of the hushed whispers and wary glances directed at the shadowed expanse. Hollowfong was a place of legends, of a lost king, a betrayed queen, and a curse that had swallowed a kingdom whole. Kasha's grandmother, a woman whose eyes held the same haunted depths as the valley itself, had filled her childhood with those tales. Tales Kasha had dismissed as folklore, the ramblings of an old woman clinging to a past that never truly existed. Until now. The air grew heavy, a palpable shift in pressure that made the fine hairs on Kasha's arms stand on end. It wasn't the wind the leaves on the oaks hung still and silent. It was something deeper, something that resonated in the marrow of her bones, a low thrumming vibration that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. She'd come seeking answers, driven by a restless unease that had settled over her like a shroud in recent weeks. Dreams, vivid and disturbing, had plagued her sleep images of crumbling towers, a golden-eyed man cloaked in shadow, and a name whispered on the wind her own. Kasha had initially dismissed them as the product of an overactive imagination, fueled by the recent anniversary of her husband, Thomas's, death. Grief, she knew, could play cruel tricks on the mind. But the dreams persisted, growing more intense, more real, until she could no longer ignore the insistent pull towards Hollowfong. She stepped past the marker, her sturdy walking boots crunching on the overgrown path. The valley floor was a tapestry of emerald green and shadowed brown, a chaotic jumble of fallen trees, moss-covered boulders, and the skeletal remains of what might once have been buildings. The air here was cooler, laced with the scent of damp earth and something else, something ancient and indefinable. It was the ruins that drew her in, not grand, imposing structures, but fragmented remnants of a forgotten civilization, a crumbling wall here, a half-buried archway there, all swallowed by the relentless embrace of nature. She moved through them with a reverence born of respect for the lost, a quiet acknowledgement of the lives that had once flourished here. The dreams had shown her a specific place, a circular clearing surrounded by standing stones, each etched with intricate carvings. She found it almost by instinct, her feet moving with a certainty that belied her conscious knowledge. The clearing was bathed in an ethereal light, the sun filtering through the dense canopy above to create a dappled mosaic on the moss-covered ground. The standing stones were taller than she'd imagined, their surfaces worn smooth by time and weather, yet the carvings remained surprisingly intact. Symbols she didn't recognize, swirling patterns that seemed to writhe and shift before her eyes. And then she saw it. On the largest stone, nestled amongst the intricate designs, was her name. Kasha Winter. Not the name she'd been born with, Kasha Davies, but the name she'd taken when she married Thomas. A name she'd chosen, a name that should have no connection to this place, to this ancient, forgotten world. The air thickened. It felt like walking through water, each breath a conscious effort. The silence of the valley deepened, broken only by the frantic hammering of her own heart. The walls sighed, a low, mournful sound that seemed to emanate from the stones themselves, a lament for something lost, something broken. And then, from the darkness, he stepped forward. He emerged from the shadow of the largest standing stone, as if he'd been waiting there for centuries, a figure sculpted from the very essence of the valley itself. Tall and lean, with a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His hair was the color of raven's wings, streaked with silver at the temples, framing a face that was both strikingly handsome and deeply unsettling. High cheekbones, a strong jawline dusted with stubble, and eyes that were the most extraordinary shade of gold Kasha had ever seen. Eyes that seemed to hold the weight of ages, the secrets of the valley, and a profound, unsettling sadness. He was dressed in clothes that seemed both ancient and timeless, a dark leather jerkin, worn trousers, and boots that looked as if they'd walked through centuries of dust and shadow. A long, silver sword hung at his hip, its hilt intricately carved with the same swirling patterns that adorned the standing stones. He didn't speak at first, simply studied her with those unnerving golden eyes, his gaze intense and unwavering. Kasha found herself unable to move, unable to speak, trapped in the magnetic pull of his presence. She felt a strange mixture of fear and familiarity, as if she'd known him all her life, yet had never met him before. Finally, he broke the silence, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured, his voice laced with a weariness that spoke of burdens carried for far too long. "But now you must see it through." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, with a weight that settled on Kasha's shoulders like a physical burden. See what through? What had she done? She opened her mouth to ask, to demand an explanation, but the words caught in her throat, choked by a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. She had come seeking answers, but now, standing before this enigmatic stranger in the heart of the forgotten valley, she realized she had stumbled upon something far more profound, far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The dreams, the name on the stone, his words had all pointed to a destiny she hadn't chosen, a path she hadn't sought, but one she was now inextricably bound to. She looked at the stone, at her name, then back at the man. A question burned, a chilling premonition unfurling within her. How long had he been waiting? Chapter 2. Echoes in the Ancient Ruins. See what through? Kasha finally managed, her voice a shaky whisper that barely disturbed the stillness of the clearing. It felt wrong, somehow, to break the silence, to shatter the fragile atmosphere that had settled around them. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. He didn't reply immediately, his golden eyes continuing to hold her captive, searching, probing, as if trying to decipher the secrets hidden within her soul. It was an unnerving sensation, feeling so exposed, so vulnerable before this stranger who seemed to know more about her than she knew about herself. He took a step closer, the movement fluid and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. Kasha instinctively recoiled, a primal fear flickering in the depths of her chest. Yet there was something else too, a strange, magnetic pull that kept her rooted to the spot, preventing her from fleeing. "You have awakened something that has slumbered for centuries," he said, his voice still low, but now laced with a hint of regret. "Something that should have remained undisturbed." "I don't understand," Kasha stammered, her mind reeling. "I just came here because of the dreams." He raised a dark eyebrow, a flicker of something that might have been amusement crossing his face. "Dreams?" he echoed, the words sounding strangely archaic on his tongue. "Dreams are but echoes of the past, whispers of what was, and what might be. They are not always to be trusted." "But they showed me this place," Kasha insisted, gesturing towards the standing stones, towards her name etched in the ancient stone. "They showed me you." He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, the weariness of a long and arduous journey. "The stones are a gateway," he explained, his gaze drifting towards the carvings. "A link to a time-long past, a time of magic and tragedy. Your presence here, your name, it has disrupted the balance." Kasha frowned, trying to make sense of his cryptic words. "Balance? What balance? I'm just an ordinary woman, living an ordinary life. I don't understand any of this." He turned his gaze back to her, his golden eyes softening slightly, a hint of empathy replacing the unsettling intensity. Ordinary? He murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. There is nothing ordinary about you, Kasha Winter. You are a descendant of a line that stretches back to the very founding of this valley, a line that carries both a blessing and a curse. Kasha felt a chill run down her spine. A curse? Her grandmother's stories, the tales she dismissed as folklore, suddenly took on a new, chilling significance. She thought of her grandmother's haunted eyes, the way she'd always warned Kasha to stay away from Holofong, to never speak of the lost king. My grandmother, she told me stories, Kasha said, her voice barely above a whisper. About a king, a curse. Stories are often watered down with time, he replied, his gaze distant, as if looking back through the mists of history. The truth is far more complex, far more painful. He began to pace slowly around the clearing, his movements deliberate, his gaze fixed on the ground, as if tracing the patterns of the ancient stones beneath his feet. This valley was once a kingdom, he said, his voice taking on a storytelling quality, a cadence that echoed the ancient tales Kasha had heard as a child. A kingdom ruled by a just and powerful king, a king who possessed a magic that was both wondrous and terrifying. He paused, his gaze lifting to meet Kasha's. His name was Arian, and he was my brother. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Kasha felt a jolt of surprise, a sudden, unexpected connection to this enigmatic stranger. He was the brother of the lost king, the king of the legends, the king who had been swallowed by the curse. What happened to him? Kasha asked, her voice filled with a sudden, urgent need to know. He looked away, a shadow of pain crossing his face. He was betrayed, he said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. Betrayed by the one he loved most, betrayed by the one he trusted above all others. And in his despair, he unleashed a power that consumed everything, a power that turned this valley into the desolate wasteland you see today. The curse, Kasha whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. He nodded. The Holofong curse, he confirmed. A curse that has bound this valley and its inhabitants for centuries. A curse that you, Kasha Winter, have now awakened. He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Your name on that stone, it's not just a name, Kasha. It's a key. A key that unlocks a power that could either save this valley or destroy it completely. His gaze held hers, a burning question in their depths, making the air around them feel charged. How could her simple name have triggered something so vast and so ancient? Chapter 3. The King's Unreadable Gaze. The weight of his words pressed down on Kasha, suffocating her. A key? A power? It felt absurd, utterly impossible. She was a retired librarian, a widow who spent her days tending her garden and her evenings reading by the fire. She wasn't a warrior, a sorceress, a wielder of ancient magic. She was just Kasha. I don't have any power, she protested, her voice shaking. I'm not who you think I am. He studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable, his expression a mask of ancient sorrow and something else, something that flickered like hope, a fragile ember in the darkness. It was that flicker, that tiny spark of possibility, that kept her from running, from turning her back on this impossible situation and fleeing back to the safety of her ordinary life. You may not believe it now, he said, his voice soft but firm, but the power is within you. It is in your blood, in your lineage, in the very essence of your being. It has simply lain dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right trigger, to awaken. He gestured towards the standing stone, towards her name etched amongst the swirling symbols. Your presence here, your connection to this place, it has stirred something ancient, something powerful. And now you are bound to it, whether you like it or not. Bound? Kasha echoed, the word sending a shiver of unease down her spine. What do you mean, bound? The curse is not simply a destructive force, he explained, his gaze drifting towards the surrounding ruins, the remnants of the lost kingdom. It is also a binding spell, a web of magic that connects all those who are descended from the original bloodline. You are a part of that web, Kasha, and you cannot escape it. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming, his proximity sending a strange mixture of fear and fascination coursing through her veins. She could smell him now, a faint, earthy scent of pine needles and old leather, a scent that was both strangely comforting and deeply unsettling. But there is a way to break the curse, he continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. A way to release this valley and its inhabitants from their long suffering. And you, Kasha, are the key to that release. Kasha felt a surge of hope, a desperate yearning for a solution, for a way out of this impossible situation.
How?
She asked, her voice barely audible. What do I have to do? He hesitated, his golden eyes searching hers, as if gauging her readiness, her willingness to accept the burden he was about to place upon her. It is a dangerous path, he warned, his voice laced with a hint of caution. A path fraught with peril and sacrifice. Are you willing to take that risk? Kasha thought of Thomas, of the quiet, peaceful life they had shared, of the emptiness that had filled her world since his passing. She thought of the dreams, the insistent pull towards this valley, the feeling that she was meant to be here, that she had a purpose, a destiny she couldn't ignore. I don't know, she admitted, her voice trembling. But I can't just walk away.
Not now.
Not after seeing this. She gestured towards the ruins, towards the standing stone, towards her name etched in the ancient script. He nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his face. Then you must be prepared to face the truth, he said, his voice firm. The truth about your heritage, the truth about the curse, and the truth about me. He paused, his gaze holding hers, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. My name is Rhys, he said, the name sounding both ancient and strangely familiar. And I am the last surviving member of the royal line of Holofong. I am Arian's brother, bound to this valley by the curse, waiting for the one who could break it. He reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly over hers. It was a simple gesture, yet it felt charged with unspoken meaning, with a connection that transcended time and space. Kasha looked at his hand, at the long, slender fingers, the calloused palm, the faint scars that hinted at battles fought and burdens carried. Will you trust me, Kasha Winter? Rhys asked, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. Will you trust me to guide you, to help you understand the power that lies within you, to help you break the curse that has haunted this valley for centuries? His eyes burned with a plea, an intensity she couldn't ignore, that pulled at something long dormant inside her. He offered no comfort, no easy answers, only a difficult path. But his gaze at it was the gaze of someone who had seen too much, and yet still held on to hope. And that was enough. She looked at the offered hand, knowing the choice she was about to make would change her life forever. What other option did she have? Chapter 4. A bargain struck in shadow. Kasha hesitated, her gaze flickering between Rhys's outstretched hand and his intense, golden eyes.
Trust.
It was a simple word, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken questions, 1,000 potential dangers. She knew nothing about this man, this Rhys, except that he was a creature of legend, a relic of a forgotten past, bound by a curse she was only beginning to understand. Yet, there was something in his gaze, a vulnerability hidden beneath the surface of ancient power that resonated with her own deep-seated loneliness, her own yearning for connection. She'd lived a life of quiet solitude since Thomas's death, a life devoid of risk, of excitement, of anything beyond the mundane routine of her daily existence. This was different. This was a chance to step outside the confines of her ordinary life, to embrace something extraordinary, even if it terrified her. She took a deep breath, the cool, damp air of the valley filling her lungs, and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, his grip surprisingly gentle, yet firm, a reassuring presence in the midst of the swirling uncertainty. His skin was warm, a stark contrast to the chill that had settled over her since entering the valley. A jolt of energy, a subtle but undeniable spark, passed between them, a connection that felt both ancient and immediate. "I'll trust you," Kasha said, her voice stronger than she expected, a newfound determination solidifying within her. A flicker of relief crossed Rhys's face, a subtle softening of his features that made him seem less intimidating, more human. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a silent acknowledgement of the bargain they had just struck, a pact sealed in the heart of the Forgotten Valley. "Then we must begin," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Time is not on our side." He released her hand, and Kasha felt a pang of loss, a sudden absence of the warmth and connection that had flowed between them. He turned and began to walk towards the edge of the clearing, towards a narrow path that led deeper into the shadowed woods. "Where are we going?" Kasha asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. "To a place where we can speak freely," Rhys replied, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "A place where we are safe from prying eyes and ears." Kasha followed him, her footsteps echoing on the moss-covered ground. The woods were dense and silent, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, their branches intertwined to form a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air grew cooler, thicker, laced with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the ever-present, mysterious fragrance of Rhys pine needles and old leather. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the only sound the rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional call of a distant bird. Kasha's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened, everything Rhys had told her. She was still struggling to accept the reality of it all, the idea that she was somehow connected to this ancient curse, that she possessed a power she didn't understand, that she was destined to play a role in the fate of this forgotten valley. Finally, they reached their destination. It was a small, hidden cave, nestled amongst the roots of a giant oak tree, its entrance concealed by a curtain of thick vines. Rhys pushed aside the vines, revealing a dark, narrow opening. "After you," he said, gesturing for Kasha to enter. Kasha hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. The cave looked dark and forbidding, a place of shadows and secrets. But she trusted Rhys, at least for now. She had made a bargain, and she would see it through. She ducked her head and stepped inside. The cave was small and damp, the air heavy with the scent of earth and something metallic, almost like blood. A single shaft of sunlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating a small, circular space. In the center of the cave, a rough-hewn stone table stood, covered with a layer of dust and cobwebs. Rhys followed her inside, pulling the vines back into place, sealing them off from the outside world. He moved to the table and, with a flick of his wrist, ignited a small, flickering flame in a tarnished silver lamp that sat upon it. The flame cast long, dancing shadows on the cave walls, revealing intricate carvings that mirrored the symbols on the standing stones in the clearing. "This is a place of power," Rhys said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin. A place where we can speak the truth, without fear of being overheard." He turned to face Kasha, his golden eyes gleaming in the flickering lamplight. "Now," he said, his voice taking on a serious tone, "it is time for you to learn the full story of Holofong, the story of the curse, and the story of your ancestors and mine." He began to speak, his voice low and resonant, weaving a tale of love and betrayal, of magic and tragedy, of a kingdom lost and a curse that had endured for centuries. Kasha listened, mesmerized, her heart pounding in her chest, as the truth of her heritage, the truth of her destiny, began to unfold before her. This cave was not a cage, it was the beginning of a revelation. She had accepted the bargain, now she was ready for the story. But as his voice dropped lower, sharing a secret about the royal line, a sudden, sharp sound broke through the stillness outside the cave. It was close, too close. Chapter 5. The Weight of a Nameless Fear. The sound a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under a heavy weight sliced through the stillness of the cave, instantly shattering the fragile atmosphere of intimacy that had been building between Kasha and Rhys. Reese's head snapped up, his golden eyes narrowing, his body tensing like a coiled spring. He extinguished the lamp with a swift movement, plunging the cave into near total darkness, broken only by the faint sliver of light filtering through the crack in the ceiling. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the frantic beating of Kasha's heart. "And be silent." He moved with a swiftness that belied his age, his form a blur in the darkness as he glided towards the entrance of the cave, his hand resting on the hilt of his silver sword. Kasha remained frozen, her body trembling, her senses on high alert. She strained her ears, listening for any further sound, any indication of what or who was lurking outside. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the ragged rhythm of her own breathing. Fear, cold and clammy, gripped her, a nameless dread that seeped into her bones. She had never considered herself a coward, but the sudden shift from the relative safety of the cave to this unknown threat left her paralyzed, her mind racing with 1,000 terrifying possibilities. She thought of the stories her grandmother had told her, tales of shadowy creatures that roamed the valley, of creatures that were neither human nor animal, creatures that served the curse, protecting its secrets, guarding its power. Were they out there now, lurking in the darkness, drawn by her presence, by the awakening of the ancient magic? The silence was broken again, this time by a low growl, a guttural sound that resonated deep within Kasha's chest, triggering a primal fear that transcended logic and reason. It was a sound that spoke of hunger, of violence, of a darkness that was ancient and implacable. Reese remained motionless, his body poised, his senses focused on the entrance of the cave. He seemed to be listening, waiting, assessing the threat. Kasha could feel the tension radiating from him, a palpable wave of energy that filled the confined space. Then she heard it. A faint rustling sound, the sound of something moving through the undergrowth, slowly, deliberately, circling the cave. It was close, too close, and Kasha could feel the presence of something other, something malevolent, watching her, waiting for her. She pressed herself against the cold, damp wall of the cave, her body trembling uncontrollably. She closed her eyes, her mind conjuring images of terrifying creatures, of sharp claws and gleaming fangs, of eyes that glowed in the darkness with an unholy light. Suddenly, the rustling stopped. The silence returned, but it was no longer the peaceful silence of the valley. It was the silence of anticipation, the silence of a predator poised to strike. Kasha held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum, her senses straining to detect any sign of movement, any indication of what was about to happen. Then, a voice spoke, a voice that was both familiar and utterly terrifying. It was a woman's voice, high and clear, but laced with a chilling coldness, a cruel amusement that made Kasha's blood run cold. "Reese?" The voice called, drawing out his name like a caress, a mockery of affection. "Are you in there, playing hide and seek with your new pet?" Kasha felt Reese stiffen beside her, his body radiating a surge of anger and fear. It was the first time she'd sensed any vulnerability in him, any crack in his stoic facade. He slowly drew his silver sword, the blade gleaming faintly in the darkness, a silent promise of defiance, of protection. "Come out, Reese," the voice continued, its tone laced with a seductive purr that sent shivers down Kasha's spine. "Don't be shy. We wouldn't want to hurt your friend, would we?" The threat hung in the air, heavy and palpable, a promise of violence that made Kasha's stomach churn. She knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that this woman, whoever she was dangerous, that she was a force to be reckoned with. Reese remained silent, his body poised, his gaze fixed on the entrance of the cave. He was waiting, calculating, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Kasha could feel the tension building within him, a coiled energy that was about to be unleashed. This fear was no longer nameless. It had a voice, and it was coming closer. The vines concealing the entrance rustled. Chapter 6. Whispers of a Cursed Lineage. The vines concealing the cave entrance parted, revealing a figure silhouetted against the faint light filtering through the trees. It was a woman, tall and slender, with long, flowing black hair that cascaded down her back like a silken waterfall. She was dressed in clothes that mirrored Rhys's dark leather and worn fabrics, but hers were adorned with intricate silver embroidery, swirling patterns that seemed to writhe and shift in the shadows. Her face was partially obscured by the darkness, but Kasha could make out the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the full curve of her lips, and the glint of her eyes that glowed with an unnerving, emerald green light, a stark contrast to Rhys's golden gaze. "Alara," Rhys said, his voice low and dangerous, the name a whispered curse. The woman Alara smiled, a slow, cruel curve of her lips that revealed sharp, white teeth. "Rhys," she purred, her voice dripping with a mocking affection. "Always hiding in the shadows. It's been too long." She stepped into the cave, her movements fluid and graceful, like a predator stalking its prey. The air around her seemed to shimmer, to crackle with an unseen energy, a palpable manifestation of her power. Kasha felt a wave of fear wash over her, a primal terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "What do you want, Alara?" Rhys asked, his voice tight with suppressed anger, his hand tightening around the hilt of his silver sword. Alara's emerald eyes flickered towards Kasha, her gaze lingering on her with a chilling amusement. "I came to see your new acquisition," she said, her voice laced with a mocking curiosity. "A descendant of the Winter line, I believe." A rather unexpected development. Kasha felt a jolt of fear, a sudden realization of the danger she was in. She was not just a bystander in this ancient conflict, she was a key player, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. "She is under my protection," Rhys said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. Alara laughed, a high, clear sound that echoed through the cave, a sound devoid of any warmth or humor. "Protection?" she scoffed. "You can barely protect yourself, Rhys. How can you possibly hope to protect her from the inevitable?" "Leave her alone, Alara," Rhys warned, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "She has nothing to do with this." Alara's smile widened, her emerald eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "Oh, but she does, Rhys," she purred. "She has everything to do with this. She is the key, the one who can unlock the full power of the curse, the one who can either save us or destroy us all." She took a step closer to Kasha, her gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Kasha felt a strange mixture of fear and fascination, a sense of being drawn into Alara's power, of being consumed by her presence. "You feel it, don't you?" Alara whispered, her voice a seductive murmur that seemed to penetrate Kasha's very soul. "The power, the ancient magic that flows through your veins. It's calling to you, isn't it? Begging to be released." Kasha felt a shiver run down her spine, a strange sensation of recognition, of familiarity. She thought of the dreams, the visions of a lost kingdom, the feeling that she was somehow connected to this place, to this ancient curse. I don't understand," Kasha stammered, her voice trembling. Alara smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made Kasha's blood run cold. "You will," she promised. "In time, you will understand everything. And then you will have a choice to make. A choice that will determine the fate of this valley and everyone in it." She turned her gaze back to Rhys, her emerald eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce intensity. "But for now," she said, her voice taking on a harder edge, "I have a message for you, Rhys. From the Council." "The Council?" Rhys echoed, his voice laced with a hint of apprehension. Alara nodded. "They are growing impatient," she said. "They are tired of waiting. They demand that you fulfill your obligation or face the consequences." Rhys's jaw tightened, his body tensing, his hand tightening around the hilt of his silver sword. "I will not betray my brother's legacy," he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. Alara laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the cave.
"Then you leave them no choice," she said.
She raised a hand, and the air around her began to shimmer, to crackle with an even more intense energy. Prepare to face your destiny, Reese, she hissed. The last words stretched into an almost inhuman growl. The emerald glow intensified, filling the cave with an eerie green light, almost reflecting off of Reese's own golden gaze, locked onto his adversary. Before Kasha could even scream, Alara lunged. Chapter 7. The Dance of Denial and Desire. Alara's lunge was swift and brutal, a blur of motion that Kasha could barely follow. Reese met her attack with equal ferocity, his silver sword flashing in the emerald light, deflecting her blows with a skill born of centuries of practice. The cave echoed with the clang of metal on metal, the harsh rasp of their breathing, the guttural sounds of their struggle. Kasha watched, frozen with terror, as the two figures clashed in a deadly dance, a whirlwind of violence and magic that threatened to consume everything in its path. She could feel the power radiating from them, a palpable force that pressed down on her, suffocating her, making it difficult to breathe. She wanted to scream, to run, to escape the terrifying spectacle unfolding before her, but she was rooted to the spot, her body paralyzed by fear, her mind reeling with 1,000 unanswered questions.
Who were these people?
What was this council Alara had mentioned? And what was her role in this ancient conflict? Reese and Alara fought with a ferocity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. They moved with a speed and agility that seemed superhuman, their bodies twisting and turning, their weapons flashing, their eyes locked in a deadly embrace. Kasha could see the strain on Reese's face, the beads of sweat that trickled down his temples, the slight tremor in his hands. He was strong, incredibly so, but Alara was clearly his equal, perhaps even his superior. Her movements were fluid and effortless, her attacks relentless, her emerald eyes gleaming with a savage joy. You cannot win, Reese, Alara hissed, her voice laced with a cruel mockery. The council has decreed it. Your time is over. I will never surrender, Reese retorted, his voice tight with anger and determination. I will protect the valley and its people from your tyranny. Their blades clashed again, sparks flying, the sound echoing through the cave. Kasha flinched, her body trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a desperate urge to help Reese, to intervene in the fight, but she knew she was powerless, that any attempt to interfere would only make things worse. Suddenly, Alara unleashed a blast of emerald energy, a wave of power that slammed into Reese, sending him flying backwards. He crashed against the stone table, the force of the impact knocking the wind out of him. He struggled to rise, his body weakened, his movements sluggish. Alara advanced on him, her emerald eyes gleaming with triumph, her silver-embroidered clothing swirling around her like a shroud. It's over, Reese, she purred, her voice a seductive whisper. Accept your fate. Reese raised his sword, his hand trembling, his eyes filled with a defiant fire. Never, he gasped, his voice hoarse. Alara laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the cave. She raised her hand, preparing to deliver the final blow. Kasha couldn't bear to watch. She closed her eyes, her body shaking uncontrollably, her mind filled with a desperate prayer, a plea for Reese to survive. But then something unexpected happened. A strange warmth began to spread through Kasha's body, a tingling sensation that started in her fingertips and toes and gradually spread throughout her entire being. She felt a surge of energy, a power she had never known before, coursing through her veins, awakening something ancient and primal within her. She opened her eyes, and the cave seemed to shimmer, to vibrate with an unseen energy. She could feel the power flowing through her, connecting her to the earth, to the stones, to the very essence of the valley. She looked at Reese, struggling to defend himself against Alara's relentless attacks, and a surge of protectiveness, of fierce determination, welled up within her. She couldn't explain it, she didn't understand it, but she knew she had to do something, anything to help him. A low hum filled the air, resonating from Kasha herself. It built in intensity, a subtle vibration at first, then growing stronger, deeper. The emerald light in the cave flickered, reacting to this new, unknown energy. Alara paused, her eyes widening slightly, not in fear yet but in surprise, in a flicker of curiosity. What? Alara began, her voice losing its mocking tone, replaced by a hint of uncertainty. Rhys, too, looked at Kasha, his golden eyes widening in astonishment, a flicker of hope replacing the grim determination. He seemed to sense something he had been waiting for, something he had almost given up on. The humming intensified, growing to a palpable thrum that shook the very air in the cave. Kasha didn't know what was happening, but a primal instinct, a force older than time, surged within her. She felt a pull, a magnetic connection to Rhys, a desperate need to protect him, and, for the first time, she saw the flicker of fear she expected in Alara's emerald eyes. The hum was no longer just a sound, it was a force. Chapter 8. Unveiling the Hollow Fong Legacy. The humming intensified, growing into a powerful resonance that vibrated through the very stones of the cave, a force that seemed to emanate from Kasha herself. The emerald light emanating from Alara flickered violently, disrupted by this new, unexpected energy. Alara staggered back, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and fear. It was the first time Kasha had seen any genuine vulnerability in the woman, any crack in her seemingly impenetrable facade. Rhys, too, was staring at Kasha, his golden eyes filled with astonishment and a glimmer of hope. He seemed to understand, on some primal level, what was happening, what Kasha was capable of. He lowered his sword slightly, his body relaxing, his gaze fixed on her with an unwavering intensity. The air in the cave crackled with energy, a tangible force that pressed down on Kasha, making it difficult to breathe. She felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration, of power and vulnerability. She had no control over what was happening, no understanding of the force that was coursing through her veins, but she knew, instinctively, that it was connected to the valley, to the curse, to her ancestors. What is this? Alara stammered, her voice losing its characteristic arrogance, replaced by a tremor of uncertainty. Kasha didn't answer. She couldn't. She was merely a conduit, a vessel for this ancient power, a channel through which it flowed. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the sensation, allowing the energy to guide her, to direct her actions. She felt a pull, a magnetic connection to Rhys, a desperate need to protect him from Alara's wrath. She raised her hands, instinctively, and a wave of energy surged forth, a shimmering, golden light that clashed with Alara's emerald glow. The two forces collided in the center of the cave, creating a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. Kasha was thrown backwards, her body slamming against the cold, damp wall of the cave. She gasped for breath, her vision blurred, her ears ringing. When she could see again, she saw Rhys standing protectively in front of her, his sword raised, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce determination. Alara was on her knees, her body trembling, her emerald light flickering weakly. Impossible, Alara whispered, her voice hoarse, her gaze fixed on Kasha with a mixture of disbelief and hatred. You are the shield. Rhys lowered his sword slightly, his gaze shifting from Alara to Kasha, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. The shield? He echoed, the word sounding both ancient and strangely significant. Alara struggled to rise, her movements sluggish, her body weakened by the force of Kasha's unexpected power. The legend, she gasped. The winter line, a hidden power, a protector. She looked at Kasha, her emerald eyes filled with a grudging respect. You are stronger than you know, she said, her voice strained. But you cannot control it. You will be consumed by it. With a final, desperate surge of energy, Alara vanished, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her power and a chilling silence. Rhys turned to Kasha, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of concern and admiration. He reached out and gently helped her to her feet, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her chilled body. Are you all right? He asked, his voice soft, his gaze searching hers for any sign of injury. Kasha nodded, her head still spinning, her body trembling from the aftereffects of the energy surge. I think so, she stammered. What was that? Rhys sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, the weariness of a long and arduous battle. That, he said, his voice low and resonant, was the awakening of your true power, Kasha. The power of the Winter Shield. He explained that the Winter lineage, Kasha's lineage, carried a hidden gift, a dormant power that was passed down through generations, awakening only in times of great need. This power, known as the Shield, was a protective force, a defense against the darkness of the Holophong curse. It was said that the shield could only be activated by a descendant of the Winter line who possessed a pure heart and a selfless spirit. Your grandmother must have known, Rhys murmured. Kasha was shocked to find herself nodding in agreement, even if she still didn't fully comprehend. She tried to keep me away. She warned me of the stories. She said it was safer to forget. Rhys nodded solemnly. She was protecting you. But now you cannot hide anymore. This must be what she always feared. Kasha looked down at her hands. It was too much too fast. She needed to process it all, at her own pace. I need air, she uttered, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Rhys immediately stepped toward the vines, pushing them back to allow Kasha to leave. We can finish this later. We should leave. Alara might return with reinforcements. But as Kasha exited the cave, she looked back, not at Rhys, but at the standing stones, illuminated by the late afternoon sun. It was starting to be clear. She did have power, and the realization created not joy, but a cold pit of growing dread. Chapter 9. The Price of a Broken Promise. The fresh air, though laced with the ever-present scent of damp earth and pine, felt like a balm to Kasha's frayed nerves. She took deep, steadying breaths, trying to regain her composure, to process the whirlwind of events that had just transpired. The cave, the fight, Alara's words, the revelation of her own hidden power, it was all too much, too fast, too overwhelming. Rhys emerged from the cave behind her, his expression a mixture of concern and something else, something that flickered like anticipation, a sense of inevitability. He seemed to understand the turmoil she was experiencing, the struggle to reconcile her ordinary life with this newfound, extraordinary reality. We should go, he said, his voice soft, his gaze gentle. We need to find a safe place to talk, to plan our next move. Kasha nodded, unable to speak, her mind still reeling. She followed him, her feet moving automatically, her senses numb, her thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear, confusion, and a strange, nascent sense of responsibility. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional call of a distant bird. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, skeletal shadows from the trees, painting the valley in hues of orange, purple, and deep, shadowed blue. As they walked, Kasha's thoughts drifted back to her grandmother, to the stories she had told her as a child, tales of the lost kingdom, of the betrayed king, of the curse that had swallowed Holophong whole. She remembered her grandmother's warnings, her insistence that Kasha stay away from the valley, that she never speak of the lost king, that she forget the ancient legends. Now she understood. Her grandmother hadn't been spinning fantastical tales. She had been trying to protect her, to shield her from the truth, from the burden of her heritage. She had known, somehow, that Kasha carried a hidden power, a power that could either save the valley or destroy it. A wave of guilt washed over Kasha, a sense of having failed her grandmother, of having broken a promise she hadn't even realized she'd made. She had stumbled into this ancient conflict, awakened this dormant power, and now she was caught in a web of magic and destiny, with no clear path forward. Rhys, Kasha finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, breaking the silence that had settled between them. What did Alara mean about the council? Rhys sighed, his gaze distant, as if looking back through the mists of time. The council, he explained, is a group of beings who have existed since the time of the curse. They are neither human nor entirely of this world. They are guardians of the curse, protectors of its power, and they are ruthless. And they want what? Kasha asked, her voice trembling slightly. They want the curse to remain, Rhys replied, his voice grim. They believe it is a necessary evil, a way to maintain balance in the world. They fear that breaking the curse would unleash a chaos that would be far more destructive. But you want to break the curse, Kasha said, her gaze searching his. Rhys nodded. I do, he confirmed. I believe that the valley and its people deserve to be free. I believe that the curse has caused enough suffering, enough pain. It is time for it to end. And Elara, she serves the council? Kasha asked. Rhys nodded again. She is their enforcer, he said, his voice laced with a hint of bitterness. Their weapon. She is powerful, and she is cruel. And me? Kasha asked, her voice barely audible. What is my role in all of this? Rhys stopped walking and turned to face her, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. You, Kasha, he said, his voice soft but firm, are the key. You are the shield. You are the only one who can break the curse. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her chilled body. But it is a dangerous path, he warned, his voice laced with a hint of caution. A path fraught with peril and sacrifice. Are you sure you are ready for this? Kasha looked into his eyes, into the depths of his ancient soul, and saw a reflection of her own fear, her own uncertainty, but also something else. Something that sparked a flicker of hope, a nascent sense of determination. She had come to this valley seeking answers, and she had found them, in the most unexpected, the most terrifying way possible. She had made a promise, a bargain struck in shadow, and she would see it through. She would face the dangers, the sacrifices, the unknown, and she would do it for the valley, for her grandmother, for Rhys, and for herself.
She wanted to say all of that. To be brave, to be strong.
But all that came out was a whisper, loaded with the heavy price she now realized she must pay.
What?
What if I fail? She whispered, her voice nearly lost to the wind's sudden gust. The trees, as if answering, began to sway, their branches creaking and groaning, like old bones stirring from a long slumber. Chapter 10. Threads of a Tangled Destiny. Rhys's hand lingered on Kasha's cheek, his touch a comforting warmth against the growing chill of the evening air. He didn't shy away from her question, from the fear that laced her voice, the vulnerability that she couldn't quite conceal. Failure is always a possibility, Kasha, he admitted, his voice soft but unflinchingly honest. But it is not a certainty. You are stronger than you believe, more powerful than you know. You have the blood of the winters flowing through your veins, the legacy of the shield, and that is a force to be reckoned with. He withdrew his hand, and Kasha felt a pang of loss, a sudden absence of the connection that had sparked between them. He began to walk again, his gaze fixed on the path ahead, his movements deliberate, his thoughts seemingly elsewhere. The curse is not simply a magical barrier, he explained, his voice taking on a storytelling quality, a cadence that echoed the ancient tales Kasha had heard as a child. It is a living entity, a sentient force that feeds on fear, on despair, on the very life force of the valley. It has been sustained for centuries by the sacrifices, the suffering, of those who are bound to it. Sacrifices? Kasha echoed, the word sending a shiver of dread down her spine. Rhys nodded. The council demands tributes, he said, his voice grim. Offerings of life to maintain the balance, to appease the curse. Elara is their collector, their enforcer. She ensures that the price is paid, that the sacrifices are made. Kasha felt a wave of nausea, a surge of revulsion at the thought of such cruelty, such barbarity. She thought of her grandmother, of the stories she had told her, of the haunted look in her eyes, the fear that had always seemed to linger just beneath the surface. And if the sacrifices are not made? Kasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The curse retaliates, Rhys replied, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. It lashes out, consuming everything in its path, twisting the land, corrupting the creatures, driving those who remain to madness. He paused, his gaze lifting to meet Kasha's. That is what happened to the kingdom, he said, his voice filled with a profound sadness. That is why Hollow Fong is a wasteland, a shadow of its former glory. The king, my brother, he refused to make the sacrifices. He refused to bow to the council's demands. And in his defiance, he unleashed a power that consumed everything. And you were there? Kasha asked, her voice filled with a sudden, urgent need to know. Reese nodded. I was, he confirmed. I witnessed it all. The betrayal, the despair, the unleashing of the curse. I tried to stop him, to reason with him, but it was too late. The power had consumed him, twisted him, driven him to madness. And you survived? Kasha asked, her voice trembling slightly. I survived, Reese replied, his voice laced with a hint of bitterness, because I was protected by a power I didn't understand at the time, a power that shielded me from the full force of the curse. He looked at Kasha, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of regret and hope. I believe, he said, his voice soft but firm, that you possess that same power, Kasha. The power of the shield. It is your birthright, your legacy, and it is the only thing that can break the curse. They had reached a small, secluded clearing, bathed in the soft, ethereal light of the setting sun. In the center of the clearing, a crumbling stone well stood, its surface covered with moss and lichen, its depths shrouded in shadow. Reese stopped beside the well, his gaze fixed on its dark, mysterious depths. This is where it all began, he said, his voice barely audible. This is where the curse was unleashed, where the kingdom was lost, where my brother died. He turned to Kasha, his golden eyes filled with a profound sadness, a weariness that spoke of centuries of suffering, of endless waiting. And this, he said, his voice taking on a new urgency, is where it must end. With you, Kasha, with the power of the shield. Kasha looked at the well, the cold seeping up and out of it like an ancient breath. It was a focal point, a nexus of sorrow and power. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Kasha said. The words felt inadequate, hollow. But they were all she had. Reese studied her, his eyes, for the first time, showing not a hint of that ancient weariness. Instead, there was resolve and belief. You are, he said, the simple words spoken with an intensity that made her want to believe them. He gestured to the well. The answer lies within, Kasha. Not in the well, but within you. He wasn't talking about the physical well. He was talking about the well of power inside of her. And as she looked at him, at the setting sun casting long shadows around them, she knew he was right. The fear, the doubt, were still there. But so was something else. Something more. Chapter 11. The Scent of Pine and Blood. Kasha stared at the well, its dark, silent depths mirroring the uncertainty that churned within her. Reese's words echoed in her mind, the answer lies within you, but she felt lost, adrift in a sea of ancient magic and terrifying possibilities. She was just Kasha, a woman who had lived a quiet, ordinary life, a woman who had never believed in magic, in curses, in anything beyond the tangible reality of her everyday existence. And yet, here she was, standing in the heart of a forgotten valley, facing a destiny she hadn't chosen, a burden she hadn't sought. She could feel the power within her, a nascent energy that thrummed beneath her skin, a connection to the earth, to the stones, to the very essence of Hollow Fong. But she didn't know how to control it, how to wield it, how to use it to break the curse that had haunted this valley for centuries. I don't know where to start, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, her gaze fixed on the well, on the darkness that seemed to beckon her, to challenge her. Reese stepped closer, his presence a comforting warmth in the growing chill of the evening. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the energy radiating from him, a subtle but undeniable force that calmed her frayed nerves, steadied her trembling hands. You start by accepting who you are, Kasha, he said, his voice soft but firm. By embracing the power that flows through your veins, by acknowledging your connection to this valley, to your ancestors, to me. He paused, his golden eyes searching hers, as if trying to decipher the secrets hidden within her soul. The shield is not just a magical power, he explained. It is a part of you, an extension of your being, a reflection of your heart, your spirit, your will. It is fueled by your courage, your compassion, your determination to protect those you care about. He gestured towards the well. This place, it holds memories, he said, his voice tinged with a profound sadness. Memories of love, of betrayal, of sacrifice, of loss. It is a place of power, a nexus of energy, where the veil between worlds is thin. It can help you to connect with your ancestors, to understand the nature of the curse, to find the strength you need to break it. He paused again, his gaze holding hers, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of encouragement and something else, something that flickered like a nascent flame, a spark of attraction that transcended the circumstances, the danger, the ancient conflict that bound them together. But it is also a dangerous place, he warned, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The curse is strong here, its influence palpable. You must be careful, Kasha. You must be strong. You must trust your instincts, and you must trust me. Kasha nodded, her heart pounding in her chest, her senses on high alert. She could feel the power of the curse, a cold, oppressive force that pressed down on her, suffocating her, making it difficult to breathe. But she could also feel the power within her, the warmth of the shield, growing stronger, steadier, fueled by her determination, by her connection to Reese, by her nascent understanding of her own heritage. What do I do? She asked, her voice barely audible above the rustling of the leaves, the whisper of the wind through the trees. Reese reached into a pouch at his belt and produced a small, silver vial, filled with a shimmering, iridescent liquid. This is a potion, he explained, his voice low and urgent. Made from herbs and minerals found only in this valley. It will enhance your connection to the shield, amplify your senses, allow you to see beyond the veil. He held out the vial to Kasha, his fingers brushing against hers, sending a jolt of warmth through her body. Drink it, he said, his voice soft but firm. And then look into the well. Kasha hesitated. A potion? It seemed so fantastical, so unreal. Yet she trusted Reese. She had come this far. She had to see it through. She took the vial, her fingers trembling slightly, and uncorked it. The scent that wafted from it was strange and intoxicating, a mixture of sweet floral notes and something earthy, almost metallic, like blood. And underlying it all, the familiar scent of pine that clung to Reese, a grounding anchor in this swirling chaos. She took a deep breath, steeling her nerves, and drank the potion in one gulp. The liquid burned as it went down, a fiery sensation that spread through her body, awakening every nerve, every cell, every fiber of her being. She felt a surge of energy, a heightened awareness, a sense of being connected to everything around her. She looked at Reese, her vision sharper, clearer, her senses amplified. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the subtle scars on his hands, the weariness that etched his features, the ancient sorrow that haunted his golden gaze. But she could also see something else, a strength, a resilience, a determination that burned like a beacon in the darkness. He looked at the well and back to her. A question. She nodded and stepped toward the well, bracing her hands on the cold stone. This time, the well's darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was a canvas, waiting. Chapter 12. A touch that burns and heals. Kasha braced herself against the cold, rough stone of the well, her hands gripping the edge, her body trembling with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The potion had heightened her senses, amplifying her awareness of the world around her, of the power that thrummed beneath the surface of the valley, of the ancient magic that permeated the very air she breathed. She looked into the well, its dark, still depths reflecting the twilight sky, the skeletal branches of the trees, the faint, shimmering glow of her own face. At first, she saw nothing but darkness, a void that seemed to swallow all light, all hope, all possibility. But then, slowly, gradually, images began to form, swirling visions that danced before her eyes, fragments of the past, echoes of forgotten lives, whispers of love and betrayal, of sacrifice and loss. She saw the kingdom of Holofong in its glory, a vibrant, thriving civilization with towering castles, bustling markets, and lush, green fields. She saw Arion, the lost king, Rhys's brother, a young, handsome man with a radiant smile and eyes that shone with the same golden light as Rhys's. She saw him laughing, dancing, ruling his kingdom with justice and compassion. She saw Alara, not as the cruel, embittered enforcer of the council, but as a young, beautiful woman, with a gentle smile and eyes that sparkled with love and devotion. She saw her and Arion together, their hands intertwined, their gazes locked in a silent promise of eternal love. She saw the council, not as shadowy, ethereal beings, but as a group of wise elders, guardians of the ancient magic, protectors of the balance between worlds. She saw them advising Arion, guiding him, warning him of the dangers of unchecked power, of the importance of sacrifice, of the delicate equilibrium that held the kingdom together. But then, the images shifted, darkened, twisted into a nightmare of betrayal and despair. She saw Alara, her face contorted with hatred, her eyes blazing with a cold, emerald fire, striking Arion down, unleashing the curse, plunging the kingdom into darkness. She saw Arion, his body racked with pain, his spirit broken, his eyes filled with a profound sadness, a devastating sense of loss. She saw him unleash the power, the raw, untamed energy that consumed everything, turning the vibrant kingdom into a desolate wasteland. She saw Rhys, a young man, witnessing the destruction, the betrayal, the death of his brother, the unleashing of the curse. She saw the horror in his eyes, the despair that threatened to consume him, the determination that solidified within him, the vow he made to protect the valley, to break the curse, to avenge his brother's death. And then she saw herself, not as Kasha Winter, the retired librarian, the widow, the ordinary woman, but as a figure from the past, a woman with silver hair and eyes that glowed with a golden light, a woman who stood beside Rhys, protecting him, shielding him from the full force of the curse. The vision faded, leaving Kasha gasping for breath, her body trembling, her mind reeling. She stumbled back from the well, her legs weak, her senses overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience. The well was once more just a stone circle filled with dark water. Rhys caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her, his touch a grounding anchor in the swirling chaos of her emotions. He held her close, his body warm and strong, his scent of pine and old leather a comforting presence in the midst of the terrifying revelations. "Kasha," he murmured, his voice soft and urgent, his breath warm against her ear. "What did you see?" Kasha struggled to speak, her throat tight with emotion, her mind still reeling from the visions. I saw everything," she stammered. "The kingdom Arion Alara the curse you," she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and understanding. "And I saw me," she whispered. "But it wasn't me. It was someone else. Someone from the past." Rhys nodded, his golden eyes filled with a profound sadness, a weariness that spoke of centuries of waiting, of hoping, of believing. "You saw your ancestor," he said, his voice low and resonant. "The first winter, the one who possessed the power of the shield, the one who protected me from the curse." He gently stroked her hair, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her chilled body. "The power is passed down through your lineage," he explained. "From mother to daughter, from generation to generation. It lies dormant, waiting for the right moment, the right trigger to awaken." He paused, his gaze holding hers, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of hope and something else, something that flickered like a nascent flame, a spark of attraction that defied the circumstances, the danger, the ancient conflict that bound them together. "And you, Kasha," he said, his voice taking on a new urgency, "are the one. You are the one who can break the curse. You are the one who can save this valley. You are the one I have been waiting for." His other hand moved, not in a romantic gesture, but to take her own hand, examining it. "It burns," he said, looking at the faint red mark that had appeared on her palm. But he didn't let go. His touch, despite the burning, was healing. It was calming the frantic pace of her heart.
What is happening to me? Kasha asked.
It was the only question she could formulate, the only question that mattered. And as Reese continued to hold her hand, she knew the answer wouldn't be simple. It would be a journey. Chapter 13. The hunt begins in earnest. Reese didn't release Kasha's hand, his thumb gently stroking the faint red mark on her palm, his touch a strange paradox of burning and healing, of pain and comfort. He looked into her eyes, his golden gaze filled with a mixture of concern, understanding, and a growing intensity that made her heart flutter, despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, despite the overwhelming weight of the destiny that had been thrust upon her. "The shield is awakening, Kasha," he said, his voice soft but firm, his gaze unwavering. "It is responding to your need, to your connection to the valley, to me. The market is a sign of its power, a manifestation of its presence. It will fade in time, but the power will remain." He paused, his gaze searching hers, as if trying to gauge her readiness, her willingness to accept the burden, to embrace the path that lay before her. "It will not be easy," he warned, his voice laced with a hint of caution. "The curse is strong, its influence pervasive. The council will not give up easily. Alara, she will be relentless. You will be tested, Kasha. You will be challenged. You will face dangers you cannot even imagine." He paused again, his thumb continuing to stroke her palm, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her chilled body. "But you are not alone," he said, his voice taking on a new urgency, a promise of support, of companionship, of something more. "I will be with you, every step of the way. I will guide you, protect you, help you to understand the power that lies within you. We will face this together, Kasha. We will break the curse together." Kasha nodded, her throat tight with emotion, her heart swelling with a mixture of fear and hope. She trusted Reese, instinctively, completely, despite the fact that she barely knew him, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. She felt a connection to him, a bond that transcended time and space, a sense of destiny, of purpose, of belonging. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the rustling of the leaves, the whisper of the wind through the trees. Reese finally released her hand, and Kasha felt a pang of loss, a sudden absence of the warmth and connection that had flowed between them. He stepped back, his expression becoming more serious, more focused, his gaze shifting towards the darkening woods. "We need to leave this place," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Alara knows about you now. She will be hunting you. The council will be watching. We need to find a safe haven, a place where we can plan our next move, where you can learn to control your power, where we can prepare for the inevitable confrontation." He turned and began to walk towards the edge of the clearing, towards a narrow path that led deeper into the shadowed woods. "We are going to my home," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness of the evening. "It is hidden, protected by ancient magic. It is the only place where we will be safe for now." Kasha followed him, her footsteps echoing on the moss-covered ground. The woods grew darker, denser, the trees looming like ancient sentinels, their branches intertwined to form a canopy that blocked out most of the remaining light. The air grew cooler, thicker, laced with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the ever-present, mysterious fragrance of Reese pine needles and old leather, a scent that had become strangely comforting, a reminder of his presence, of his protection, of his promise. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the rustling of leaves underfoot and the occasional call of a distant night bird. Kasha's mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened, everything Reese had told her, everything she had seen in the well. She was still struggling to accept the reality of it all, the idea that she was the shield, the key to breaking the ancient curse, the one who could save Holofong from its long suffering. As they walked, Kasha became aware of a faint sound, a distant, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath her feet. It was a subtle vibration, a low hum that resonated deep within her chest, triggering a primal instinct, a sense of unease. "What is that sound?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her gaze scanning the shadowed woods, searching for the source of the unsettling noise. Rhys stopped walking and turned to face her, his golden eyes narrowing, his body tensing, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his silver sword. "It's the hunt," he said, his voice grim, his gaze fixed on a point in the distance, beyond the trees, beyond the shadows. "They're coming." Before Kasha could even ask who they were, the rhythmic pulsing intensified, growing into a deafening roar, accompanied by the sound of snapping branches, pounding footsteps and growls. Animalistic, savage growls that made her blood run cold. They were surrounded. Chapter 14. Secrets hidden in plain sight. The growls intensified, echoing through the darkening woods, a chorus of savage snarls that sent shivers down Kasha's spine. She could feel the vibrations in the earth now, the pounding of heavy footsteps, the snapping of branches, the sense of an approaching force, relentless pursuit that was closing in on them with terrifying speed. "What is it?" Kasha whispered, her voice trembling, her gaze darting nervously around the shadowed trees, searching for the source of the imminent threat. Rhys didn't answer, his body coiled and tense, his golden eyes narrowed, his hand gripping the hilt of his silver sword. He scanned the surrounding woods, his senses on high alert, his every muscle poised for action. Then they emerged from the shadows. They were creatures unlike anything Kasha had ever seen before, monstrous figures that blurred the line between human and animal. Tall and muscular, with thick, matted fur, sharp claws, and gleaming fangs, they moved with a terrifying speed and agility, their eyes glowing with an unholy, emerald green light, a chilling reflection of Alera's malevolent gaze. "Wargs," Rhys hissed, the word a whispered curse, his voice filled with a mixture of disgust and grim determination. Creatures of the council, twisted by the curse, servants of Alera. There were at least a dozen of them surrounding Kasha and Rhys, blocking their path, cutting off their escape. They circled slowly, their growls growing louder, their eyes fixed on their prey, their bodies tense and ready to pounce. Kasha felt a wave of terror wash over her, a paralyzing fear that threatened to overwhelm her. She had never faced anything like this before, never even imagined that such creatures could exist. She was just Kasha, an ordinary woman, caught in a nightmare of ancient magic and terrifying monsters. But then, she remembered Rhys's words, "You are not alone, I will be with you, we will face this together," and a flicker of courage, a nascent sense of determination, sparked within her. She was the shield, the protector, the one who could break the curse. She couldn't give in to fear. She couldn't allow herself to be paralyzed by terror. She had to fight, for Rhys, for the valley, for herself. "What do we do?" Kasha asked, her voice surprisingly steady, her gaze fixed on Rhys, seeking his guidance, his strength, his unwavering resolve. Rhys drew his silver sword, the blade gleaming faintly in the fading light, a silent promise of defiance, of protection. "We fight," he said, his voice low and urgent, his gaze never leaving the circling wargs. "We fight our way through. We get to my home. It's our only chance." He positioned himself between Kasha and the nearest warg, his body shielding her from the immediate threat, his sword raised, his eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Stay close to me," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. "And trust your instincts. The shield will guide you." The wargs attacked. They lunged with a savage ferocity, their claws extended, their fangs bared, their growls turning into deafening roars. Rhys met their attack with equal force, his silver sword flashing, deflecting their blows, his movements fluid and graceful, a deadly dance of steel and fury. Kasha felt a surge of power coursing through her veins, the warmth of the shield spreading throughout her body, awakening her senses, sharpening her reflexes, giving her a strength she hadn't known she possessed. She raised her hands instinctively, and a shimmering, golden light emanated from her palms, forming a protective barrier, deflecting the claws of a warg that lunged towards her. The battle raged, A chaotic melee of growls, snarls, the clang of metal on claw, the thud of bodies hitting the ground. Rhys fought with a skill and ferocity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, his silver sword a blur of motion, cutting down wargs left and right, protecting Kasha with every fiber of his being. Kasha fought too, instinctively, relying on the power of the shield, deflecting attacks, pushing back the wargs, protecting herself and Rhys as best she could. She was surprised by her own strength, by her own courage, by her own ability to fight, to survive. But the wargs were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless, their attacks savage and unyielding. Rhys was growing tired, his movements slowing, his breathing becoming ragged. Kasha could feel the strain on him, the toll the battle was taking, the fear that he wouldn't be able to protect her, that they would both be overwhelmed. Suddenly, one of the wargs broke through Rhys's defenses, its claws raking across his arm, drawing blood. Rhys staggered back, his face contorted with pain, his grip on his sword loosening. Kasha screamed, a primal cry of fear and rage. She lunged forward, channeling all her energy, all her power, into a surge of golden light that slammed into the warg, sending it flying backwards, crashing into the trees with a sickening thud. She turned to Rhys, her heart pounding in her chest, her eyes filled with concern. "Rhys," she cried, reaching out to him, her hand hovering over his bleeding arm. He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of pain, gratitude, and something else, something that flickered like admiration, like pride, like a nascent love that defied the circumstances, the danger, the ancient conflict that had brought them together. But then his eyes widened in alarm. "Behind you!" he shouted. Kasha whirled around, just as another warg lunged towards her, its claws extended, its fangs bared, its eyes blazing with a savage hunger. She raised her hands, but it was too late. The warg was too close, too fast. She braced herself for the inevitable impact, the searing pain, the crushing blow. But it never came. Instead, a shimmering, almost invisible barrier appeared, inches from her face. The warg slammed against it, recoiling with a surprised yelp. Kasha stared, realizing what it was. The shield. But not how she had used it before. This was automatic. Instinctive. "We need to go." Now Rhys stated, grabbing Kasha's uninjured hand. He began to run, pulling her along. He knew a secret hidden in plain sight. A way to escape, at least for a while. He hoped it was still there. The wargs, momentarily stunned, resumed their chase. The hunt, Kasha realized, had only just begun. Chapter 15. The Shifting Sands of Trust. Rhys pulled Kasha through the dense undergrowth, his pace relentless, his grip on her hand firm and unwavering. The sounds of the pursuing wargs echoed behind them, a constant reminder of the imminent danger, of the relentless hunt that showed no sign of abating. Kasha stumbled along, her lungs burning, her legs aching, her body exhausted from the fight, from the fear, from the constant adrenaline surge that coursed through her veins. She trusted Rhys, implicitly, completely, her life literally in his hands, but she couldn't help but wonder where he was leading her, what his plan was, how they could possibly escape the seemingly endless pursuit of the wargs. "Where are we going?" she gasped, her voice strained, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Rhys didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the path ahead, his senses on high alert, his every muscle tense and ready for action. He seemed to be following a hidden trail, a barely discernible path that wound its way through the dense trees, over fallen logs, across moss-covered rocks. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing, a small, secluded space hidden amongst the towering trees. In the center of the clearing, a massive oak stood, its branches reaching towards the sky like gnarled, skeletal fingers, its trunk wider than any tree Kasha had ever seen before. Rhys stopped at the base of the oak, his grip on Kasha's hand tightening, his gaze fixed on a seemingly unremarkable section of the trunk. He reached out and pressed his hand against the bark, his fingers tracing a hidden pattern, a series of intricate carvings that were almost invisible to the naked eye. Kasha watched, her breath held captive in her chest, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. She could feel the power emanating from the tree, a subtle but undeniable energy that thrummed beneath her skin, a connection to the ancient magic that permeated the valley. Suddenly, the bark began to shimmer, to ripple, to shift. A section of the trunk slid open, revealing a dark, narrow opening, a hidden passage that led into the heart of the tree. Inside, Rhys said, his voice low and urgent, his gaze flickering towards the sounds of the approaching wargs, which were growing closer, louder, more menacing.
Quickly.
Kasha didn't hesitate. She ducked her head and stepped into the opening, Rhys following close behind. As soon as they were inside, the bark slid back into place, sealing them off from the outside world, plunging them into near total darkness. They were in a small, circular chamber, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, old wood, and something ancient and magical, a fragrance that both calmed and unsettled her. Rhys reached into a pouch at his belt and produced a small, crystal orb, which began to glow with a soft, ethereal light, illuminating the chamber, revealing its intricate carvings, its smooth, curved walls, its sense of hidden power. "This is the heart of the oak," Rhys explained, his voice echoing in the confined space. "A place of sanctuary, protected by ancient magic, invisible to those who do not know its secrets." He led Kasha to a small alcove carved into the wall, where a rough-hewn bench stood, covered with soft furs. "Rest," he said, his voice gentle, his gaze filled with concern.
"You are safe here for now."
Kasha sank onto the bench, her body exhausted, her mind reeling. She looked around the chamber, at the intricate carvings, at the glowing orb, at Rhys, his face illuminated by the soft light, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and something else, something that flickered like a nascent flame, a spark of attraction that defied the circumstances, the danger, the ancient conflict that had brought them together. How did you know about this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her gaze fixed on Rhys, seeking answers, seeking reassurance, seeking connection. Rhys sat down beside her, his body close to hers, his warmth a comforting presence in the chill of the chamber. "It is a secret passed down through my family," he explained, his voice low and resonant. "A place of refuge, known only to a select few. My brother Arian, he showed it to me long ago, before the curse." He paused, his gaze distant, as if looking back through the mists of time, his expression a mixture of sadness, regret, and a lingering fondness for a brother lost, a kingdom destroyed. "He used to come here," Rhys continued, his voice tinged with a profound melancholy, "to escape the pressures of the court, to commune with nature, to connect with the ancient magic of the valley. He said it was a place of peace, a place of healing, a place where he could be himself." He turned to Kasha, his golden eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "And now," he said, his voice taking on a new urgency, "it is our sanctuary, our refuge, our place to heal and to plan our next move." He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her chilled body. "You are amazing out there, Kasha," he said, his voice soft but firm, his gaze filled with admiration, with pride, with a growing affection that he couldn't quite conceal. "You fought bravely. You protected me. You surprised me." Kasha felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a warmth that spread through her body, a response to his touch, to his words, to the intensity of his gaze. She had never considered herself brave, never thought of herself as a fighter, but she had faced the wargs, she had protected Rhys, she had tapped into a power she hadn't known she possessed. "I just did what I had to do," she stammered, her voice trembling slightly, her gaze dropping from his, unable to hold the intensity of his stare. Rhys chuckled softly, a warm, comforting sound that eased the tension, the fear, the uncertainty that had been building within her. "You did more than that, Kasha," he said, his voice gentle, his gaze unwavering. You showed yourself what you are truly capable of." He paused, his thumb gently stroking her cheek, his touch sending a shiver of electricity through her body, a spark of desire that ignited a flame within her, a flame that had been dormant for far too long. But then, his expression changed, becoming more serious, more focused, his gaze shifting towards the entrance of the chamber, towards the sound of the wargs, which were still audible, though muffled, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked outside, of the relentless hunt that would continue as soon as they emerged. The trust, Kasha realized, had shifted. It wasn't just her trusting him. He was trusting her, too. And that realization, more than anything, shifted something deep within her. She was no longer just following. She was a partner. And a partner needed to know the truth. "Rhys," she said, her voice now firm, determined. "Tell me everything. About the council. About Alara. About everything." Chapter 16. A Love Forged in Fire. Rhys looked at Kasha, his golden eyes searching hers, gauging her readiness, her willingness to hear the truth, the full, unvarnished truth, about the council, about Alara, about the ancient conflict that had shaped his life, and now, hers. He saw the determination in her eyes, the strength that had emerged from within her, the courage that had blossomed in the face of unimaginable danger. He knew he couldn't hide anything from her, not anymore. She was his partner, his equal, his shield. And she deserved to know everything. He took a deep breath, the scent of old wood and ancient magic filling his lungs, and began to speak, his voice low and resonant, weaving a tale of power, betrayal, and a love that had been twisted, corrupted, consumed by the darkness of the curse. "The council," he began, "was formed centuries ago, long before the kingdom of Holofong even existed. They were a group of powerful sorcerers, guardians of the ancient magic that flowed through this land, protectors of the balance between worlds. They believed that magic was a force to be respected, controlled, wielded only for the greater good, for the preservation of harmony, for the prevention of chaos." He paused, his gaze distant, as if looking back through the mists of time, his expression a mixture of respect and disdain. "They were wise, in their way," he continued, "but they were also rigid, unyielding, blinded by their own power, their own sense of righteousness. They believed that they knew what was best for everyone, that their way was the only way, that any deviation from their strict rules, their ancient laws, was a threat to be eliminated." "And Arian, he challenged them?" Kasha asked, her voice soft but firm, her gaze unwavering. Rhys nodded. "He did," he confirmed. "He believed that magic should be free, that it should be accessible to everyone, that it should be used to heal, to create, to bring joy, not just to control, to restrict, to punish. He saw the potential for good in magic, the power to transform the world, to make it a better place. But the council, they saw him as a threat, a danger to their authority, to their control." "And Alara?" Kasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her heart aching for the young woman she had seen in the vision, the woman who had loved Arian, before the curse had twisted her, corrupted her, turned her into the cruel enforcer of the council. Rhys sighed, his gaze filled with a profound sadness, a weariness that spoke of centuries of loss, of regret, of a love that had been shattered, destroyed by the darkness. "Alara," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "was everything to Arian. She was his love, his confidant, his partner, his equal. She shared his vision, his belief in the power of magic for good, his desire to create a better world. She was beautiful, kind, compassionate, with a spirit that shone brighter than any star." He paused, his hand reaching out to gently touch Kasha's cheek, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her chilled body. "She reminded me of you," he whispered, his voice barely audible, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Kasha felt a blush creep up her cheeks, a warmth that spread through her body, a response to his touch, to his words, to the unspoken emotion that flickered in his golden eyes. She saw the pain in his gaze, the loss, the regret, but she also saw something else, a spark of hope, a nascent flame of attraction, a love that was being forged in the fire of their shared danger, their shared destiny. But the council, they saw her as a weakness. Rhys continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, a bitterness that spoke of betrayal, of a wound that had never fully healed. They knew that they could control Arian through her, that they could manipulate him, use his love for her to force him to comply with their demands. And they used her? Kasha asked, her voice filled with a growing anger, a sense of injustice that mirrored her own feelings about the council, about the curse, about the suffering it had caused. Rhys nodded. They did, he confirmed. They threatened her. They tortured her. They corrupted her. They used their magic to twist her mind, to break her spirit, to turn her into their weapon, their enforcer, their slave. He looked at Kasha, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. And that, he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering, is what we are fighting against, Kasha. Not just the curse, not just the council, but the darkness that corrupts, that twists, that destroys everything that is good, everything that is beautiful, everything that is love. He reached out and took her hand, and, as if mirroring his honesty, Kasha found herself telling Rhys about her life, her marriage with Thomas, her quiet, ordinary life that now felt like a distant dream. She found comfort in sharing, in allowing herself the vulnerability to be known. And in the heart of the oak, surrounded by ancient magic, with the sounds of the hunt echoing faintly outside, a new kind of connection sparked between them. A love, born not of ease and comfort, but of shared pain, shared purpose, and shared hope. It was a love that burned, not with the destructive fire of the curse, but with the healing warmth of the shield. Chapter 17. The Valley's Silent Watchers. The silence that followed Rhys's revelation hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the faint, rhythmic pulsing of the ancient oak that surrounded them, a heartbeat of the valley itself, a constant reminder of the power that flowed beneath the surface, of the ancient magic that permeated every stone, every tree, every breath they took. Kasha processed his words, her mind reeling with the enormity of the story, with the tragedy of Arian and Alara, with the cruelty of the council, with the weight of the destiny that had been thrust upon her. She felt a profound sadness for Rhys, for the loss he had endured, for the centuries of suffering he had witnessed, for the burden he had carried alone for so long. But she also felt a surge of anger, a righteous fury at the injustice of it all, at the corruption of love, at the twisting of magic, at the destruction of a kingdom, at the enslavement of a people. And she felt a growing determination, a fierce resolve to fight, to resist, to break the curse, to free the valley, to avenge the wrongs of the past, to create a future where love, not fear, would reign. "We need a plan," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering, her hand tightening around Rhys's, a silent promise of support, of companionship, of a love that was growing stronger, deeper, with every passing moment. Rhys nodded, his golden eyes meeting hers, a flicker of hope rekindled in their depths, a spark of determination that mirrored her own. "We do," he confirmed. "And I have an idea, but it is dangerous, risky, and it will require us to trust more than just each other." He paused, his gaze searching hers, gauging her reaction, her willingness to embrace the unknown, to step outside the confines of their sanctuary, to face the dangers that awaited them. "There are others," he explained, his voice low and hesitant, "who are not under the council's control. Beings who have lived in this valley for centuries, hidden from sight, watching, waiting, hoping for a chance to break free from the curse. They are different from us, from the wargs, from the council. They are creatures of the valley, guardians of its secrets, protectors of its ancient magic." "What kind of creatures?" Kasha asked, her voice tinged with apprehension, her mind conjuring images of fantastical beings, of mythical beasts, of creatures she had only read about in books, in legends, in folklore. "They are called the Sylvans," Rhys replied, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking their name aloud might break the spell, might reveal their hidden existence to the prying eyes of the council. They are beings of nature, spirits of the trees, guardians of the forests, protectors of the balance. They are powerful, wise, and ancient. He paused again, his gaze holding hers, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. They are also reclusive, he continued, his voice laced with a hint of caution. They do not trust easily. They have been betrayed before, by humans, by the council, by those who sought to exploit their power, to control their magic. It will not be easy to gain their trust, to convince them to help us. But they want the curse broken? Kasha asked, her voice filled with a growing sense of hope, of possibility, of a potential alliance that could shift the balance of power, that could give them a fighting chance against the seemingly insurmountable forces of the council. Rhys nodded. They do, he confirmed. They have suffered under the curse, just as we have. They have witnessed the destruction of the valley, the corruption of its magic, the enslavement of its people. They yearn for freedom, for a return to the balance, for a world where nature can thrive, where magic can flow freely, where love can flourish without fear. Then we must try, Kasha said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering, her heart filled with a newfound determination, a sense of purpose that transcended her own fears, her own doubts, her own limitations. We must reach out to them, convince them to join us, to fight with us, to help us break the curse. Rhys smiled, a slow, genuine smile that lit up his face, a smile that reached his eyes, a smile that revealed the hope that had been rekindled within him, the belief that they could succeed, that they could overcome the darkness, that they could create a better future, together. We will, he said, his voice filled with a newfound confidence, a sense of shared purpose, a love that was growing stronger with every passing moment.
But first, we need to rest.
We need to regain our strength. We need to prepare ourselves for the journey ahead. He leaned back against the soft furs that lined the alcove, his body close to Kasha's, his warmth a comforting presence in the chill of the chamber. He closed his eyes, his breathing slowing, his body relaxing, his mind seemingly at peace, for the first time in centuries. Kasha watched him, her heart filled with a mixture of love, admiration, and a growing sense of protectiveness. She knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, with uncertainty, with challenges that would test their strength, their courage, their love. But she also knew that they were not alone. They had each other. They had the power of the shield. And they had the hope, the possibility, of an alliance with the Sylvans, the silent watchers of the valley, the guardians of its secrets, the protectors of its ancient magic. And as she watched Rhys sleep, Kasha felt the first faint whispers of a plan forming in her own mind, a plan that would take them out of the heart of the oak and into the heart of the valley's greatest mystery.
But first, she too needed rest.
Chapter 18. Betrayal's Bitter Sting. The hours within the heart of the oak passed in a strange, timeless suspension. Kasha, despite her exhaustion, found sleep elusive. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the past few days, the revelations, the battles, the burgeoning connection with Rhys, the daunting task that lay ahead. She watched him sleep, his face relaxed in slumber, the lines of worry and weariness softened, the golden light of his eyes hidden beneath his closed lids. She felt a fierce protectiveness towards him, a love that had blossomed with surprising speed and intensity, a bond forged in fire, in shared danger, in a shared destiny. As the first faint rays of dawn filtered through the magical barrier of the oak, Rhys stirred, his eyes slowly opening, his golden gaze focusing on Kasha, a soft smile gracing his lips. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep, his hand reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "Morning," Kasha replied, her voice soft, her heart warmed by his touch, by his smile, by the simple, profound joy of waking up beside him, safe, protected, loved. They shared a simple meal of dried meat and fruit that Rhys had stored within the oak, their conversation quiet, intimate, filled with a shared understanding, a shared purpose, a shared hope. They discussed Kasha's nascent plan, the idea of seeking out the Sylvans, of forging an alliance with the ancient guardians of the valley. Rhys was initially hesitant, cautious, aware of the risks, of the Sylvans' reclusive nature, of their distrust of outsiders. But Kasha's determination, her unwavering belief in the possibility of success, her passionate plea for a united front against the council, eventually won him over. "All right," he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering, his hand clasping hers, a silent promise of support, of companionship, of a love that transcended the circumstances, the danger, the ancient conflict that bound them together. "We will seek out the Sylvans. But we must be careful, Kasha. We must be respectful. We must be patient." They left the heart of the oak, stepping back into the world, into the valley, into the ever-present threat of the curse, of the council, of Alara's relentless hunt. The sun was rising, casting long, golden rays through the trees, illuminating the forest floor, revealing the beauty, the magic, the hidden dangers of Hollowfong. Rhys led Kasha through a hidden path, a barely discernible trail that wound its way through the dense undergrowth, over moss-covered rocks, across babbling brooks, deeper and deeper into the heart of the valley. He moved with a confidence, a knowledge of the land, that spoke of centuries of familiarity, of a connection to the valley that ran deeper than blood, deeper than magic, deeper than life itself. As they walked, Rhys spoke of the Sylvans, of their history, of their culture, of their powers, of their relationship with the valley, with the curse, with the council. He described them as beings of pure energy, shapeshifters who could take the form of trees, of animals, of the very wind itself. He spoke of their wisdom, their patience, their deep connection to nature, their ability to heal, to protect, to destroy. "They are the soul of the valley, Kasha," he said, his voice filled with a profound respect, a reverence that bordered on awe. "They are the guardians of its balance, the protectors of its secrets, the keepers of its ancient magic. If we can gain their trust, if we can convince them to join us, we will have a powerful ally, a force that could tip the scales in our favor." After hours of walking, they reached a clearing, a hidden sanctuary bathed in an ethereal light, a place of breathtaking beauty, of profound peace, of palpable magic. In the center of the clearing, a waterfall cascaded down a cliff face, its waters shimmering like liquid silver, its spray creating a rainbow that arched across the sky. Ancient trees surrounded the clearing, their branches reaching towards the heavens like supplicating arms, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, their roots intertwined to form a living tapestry. "This is the Vale," Rhys said, his voice barely above a whisper, his gaze fixed on the waterfall, on the rainbow, on the ancient trees, on the beauty and magic that surrounded them. "A sacred place to the Sylvans, a gateway to their realm, a place where the veil between worlds is thin." He turned to Kasha, his golden eyes filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "We must wait here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We must show them that we are not a threat, that we come in peace, that we seek their help, their guidance, their alliance." They sat down on a moss-covered rock, their bodies close, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in unison, their gazes fixed on the waterfall, on the rainbow, on the ancient trees, waiting, hoping, praying for a sign, for a response, for a glimmer of hope in the darkness that surrounded them. Suddenly, the air shimmered, the waterfall rippled, the rainbow fractured, and a figure emerged from the cascading water, a being of pure energy, of light and shadow, of nature and magic. It was tall and slender, with flowing hair that resembled leaves, eyes that glowed with the light of the forest, and a presence that radiated power, wisdom, and ancient sorrow. It was a Sylvan. The Sylvan approached them slowly, its gaze fixed on Kasha, its eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and recognition. "You are the shield," the Sylvan said, its voice a melodic whisper, a symphony of nature's sounds, of wind and water, of rustling leaves and birdsong. "The one who carries the power of the winters, the one who can break the curse." Kasha nodded, her voice caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest, her mind reeling with the enormity of the moment, with the weight of the destiny that had brought her here, to this sacred place, to this encounter with the ancient guardians of the valley. "I am," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but filled with a newfound determination, a sense of purpose, a love that fueled her courage, her strength, her resolves. "And I seek your help, to break the curse, to free the valley." The Sylvan studied her for a long moment, its gaze piercing, its wisdom profound, its understanding of the world, of magic, of the human heart, far beyond Kasha's comprehension. But then before it could reply, a familiar voice echoed. "Alara." "How touching," she said, stepping into the clearing, wargs flanking her. A cruel smile played on her face. Rhys jumped to his feet, pulling Kasha with him. "How did you find us?" he asked. Alara smirked, pointing to Kasha's hand, the one Rhys had held so tenderly within the oak. "The mark," she said. "It's a beacon, not just of the shield, but of your magic, Rhys. A connection I could trace. Foolish of you to let your guard down." Rhys's face was a mask of horror and anguish as he realized the truth. His touch, meant to heal, had betrayed them. His love, meant to protect, had led them into a trap. Chapter 19. The King's Unspoken Sacrifice. The clearing, once a sanctuary of peace and beauty, transformed into a scene of impending violence. The emerald glow of Alara's eyes, mirrored by the wargs flanking her, clashed with the soft, natural light of the veil, creating a jarring dissonance, a visual representation of the conflict that had engulfed Hollowfong. Rhys stood protectively in front of Kasha, his silver sword drawn, his body tense, his golden eyes blazing with a mixture of fury, regret, and a desperate determination to protect the woman he loved. "You will not touch her, Alara," Rhys growled, his voice low and dangerous, the threat unmistakable. Alara laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the clearing, a sound devoid of any warmth, any compassion, any humanity. "Always the protector, Rhys," she sneered. "But your protection is flawed, as you so clearly demonstrated. Your love is your weakness." She gestured towards Kasha, her emerald eyes gleaming with a triumphant malice. "The shield," she said, her voice dripping with a venomous satisfaction. "The key to breaking the curse or to strengthening it. The council will be pleased." The wargs snarled, their eyes fixed on Kasha, their bodies tensed, ready to pounce, their emerald glow intensifying, reflecting Alara's cruel intent. Kasha felt a surge of fear, a primal terror that threatened to overwhelm her, but she stood firm, her hand reaching for Rhys's, her fingers intertwining with his, a silent promise of support, of companionship, of a love that would not be broken, even in the face of death. She was the shield, and she would not yield. "We will not let you take her," Rhys said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering, his grip on Kasha's hand tightening, a lifeline in the storm that raged around them. The Sylvan, who had remained silent, watching the unfolding drama with an ancient sorrow, finally spoke, its voice a melodic whisper that cut through the tension, a sound of power, of wisdom, of a deep connection to the valley, to the curse, to the ancient magic that permeated the very air they breathed. "The council seeks to control the power of the shield," the Sylvan said, its gaze shifting from Alara to Kasha, its eyes filled with a mixture of warning and hope. "To use it for their own selfish purposes, to perpetuate the curse, to maintain their dominion over this valley." Alara scoffed, her emerald eyes flashing with anger, her patience wearing thin. "The council seeks balance," she retorted, her voice laced with a venomous arrogance. "The curse is necessary, a means of controlling the chaos, of preventing a greater destruction." The Sylvan shook its head, its leafy hair rustling in the gentle breeze, its voice a symphony of nature's sounds, a lament for a lost paradise, a plea for a future free from fear, from control, from the darkness of the curse. "Balance cannot be achieved through control," the Sylvan said, its voice firm, its gaze unwavering. It can only be achieved through harmony, through understanding, through a respect for the natural order, for the flow of magic, for the freedom of all beings. It turned to Kasha, its eyes filled with a profound wisdom, a deep understanding of the human heart, of the power of love, of the strength of the shield. "The choice is yours, Kasha Winter," the Sylvan said, its voice a gentle whisper, a call to action, a plea for salvation. "You can use your power to break the curse, to free the valley, to restore the balance, or you can allow the council to use you, to strengthen the curse, to perpetuate the suffering, to condemn this valley to an eternity of darkness." Alara laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the clearing.
"Choice?"
she sneered. "She has no choice. She is ours. She belongs to the council." She raised her hand, signaling the wargs to attack. But before they could move, Rhys stepped forward, his silver sword raised, his golden eyes blazing with a fierce determination, a love that transcended fear, a courage that defied death. "No," he said, his voice resonating with a power that Kasha had never heard before, a power that seemed to emanate from the very depths of his soul, from his connection to the valley, to the curse, to the ancient magic that flowed through his veins. "She is not yours. She is not the council's. She is mine." He turned to Kasha, his gaze softening, his eyes filled with a love that was both heartbreaking and inspiring, a love that had endured for centuries, a love that had been tested by fire, by betrayal, by loss, a love that had finally found its true expression, its true purpose, in this moment, in this place, in this desperate fight for freedom. And then, with a final, desperate act of protection, an echo of the ancient magic that had created the curse, he used the very last remnants of the king's power within him. Power tied to his blood, his lineage, his very life force. He pushed Kasha towards the Sylvan, his voice a whispered plea.
"Protect her," he said.
And to Kasha, he said, his eyes holding a depth of emotion that transcended words, "Live." The clearing exploded with light. Not golden, not emerald, but a blinding white that consumed everything. It was the last sacrifice. The king's unspoken sacrifice. And as the light faded, Kasha knew, with a certainty that shattered her heart, that Rhys was gone. Chapter 20. The final confrontation of hearts. The white light subsided, leaving Kasha blinking, disoriented, her heart a gaping wound of grief and disbelief.
Rhys was gone.
His sacrifice, a blinding flash of pure energy, had saved her, protected her, but at the cost of his own existence. She could feel the void where his presence had been, the chilling absence of his warmth, his strength, his love. She stood beside the Sylvan, the ancient guardian of the valley, its form shimmering with a renewed power, a protective aura that surrounded Kasha, shielding her from the immediate threat. Alara and the wargs were gone, thrown back by the force of Rhys's sacrifice, scattered, disoriented, their emerald glow extinguished, their threat momentarily neutralized. But Kasha knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Alara would return, more enraged, more determined than ever to capture her, to deliver her to the council, to use her power to strengthen the curse. She looked around the clearing, at the waterfall, at the rainbow, at the ancient trees, at the place where Rhys had stood, where he had sacrificed himself for her, for the valley, for the future. The beauty of the vale, once a source of peace and hope, now felt like a mockery, a painful reminder of what she had lost, of the price that had been paid. The Sylvan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, its touch a comforting presence, a source of strength, a connection to the ancient magic of the valley, to the spirit of Rhys, to the hope that still flickered, however faintly, in the darkness. "He is gone," the Sylvan said, its voice a melodic whisper, a lament for a lost soul, a tribute to a selfless sacrifice. "But his spirit lives on in you, in the valley, and the magic that binds us all." Kasha nodded, tears streaming down her face, her heart shattered, her spirit broken, but her resolve strengthened. Rhys's sacrifice would not be in vain. She would not allow his love, his courage, his selflessness to be for naught. She would fight on, for him, for the valley, for the future. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice trembling, but filled with a newfound determination, a sense of purpose that transcended her grief, her fear, her loss. The Sylvan looked at her, its eyes filled with a profound wisdom, a deep understanding of the human heart, of the power of love, of the strength of the shield. "You must embrace your power, Kasha Winter," the Sylvan said, its voice firm, its gaze unwavering. "You must become the shield, not just in name, but in spirit, in action, in essence. You must confront the council, challenge their authority, break the curse, free the valley."
"But how?"
Kasha asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her mind reeling with the enormity of the task, with the seemingly insurmountable odds, with the terrifying power of the council. The Sylvan gestured towards the waterfall, towards the shimmering, cascading water, towards the rainbow that arched across the sky. "The answer lies within the heart of the curse," the Sylvan said, its voice a gentle whisper, a guide to action, a beacon of hope. "Within the place where it all began, where the kingdom was lost, where Arian unleashed his power, where Rhys sacrificed himself." Kasha knew what the Sylvan meant. The well, the place of power, the nexus of energy, the source of the curse, the place where she had seen the visions, where she had connected with her ancestors, where she had first felt the power of the shield. "I must go back," she said, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering, her heart filled with a mixture of dread and determination. "I must face the council. I must break the curse." The Sylvan nodded. "You must," it confirmed, "but you will not go alone. We, the Sylvans, will stand with you. We will fight with you. We will help you to break the curse, to free the valley, to restore the balance." And so, Kasha, accompanied by the Sylvans, began her journey back to the well, back to the heart of the curse, back to the place where it all began, where it would all end. She walked with a newfound strength, a fierce resolve, a love that burned brighter than any fear, a determination that transcended her own grief, her own loss, her own limitations. She was the shield, and she would not fail. She reached the well, the familiar clearing now imbued with a sense of finality, of destiny, of a confrontation that had been centuries in the making. The well stood silent, its dark depths reflecting the sky, the trees, the waiting figures. The council was there, not in ethereal form, but in physical bodies, ancient, powerful, their eyes glowing with a cold, white light. And at their center, Alara, her emerald eyes blazing with a hatred that chilled Kasha to the bone. "You cannot win, shield," Alara hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "The curse is eternal. The council is all-powerful." Kasha stepped forward, her head held high, her heart pounding, but her spirit unbroken. She raised her hands, and the power of the shield surged through her, a golden light that enveloped her, protected her, empowered her. "The curse ends here," Kasha said, her voice resonating with a power that surprised even her, a power born of love, of loss, of sacrifice, of a destiny fulfilled. And love is stronger than any curse. The final confrontation had begun. It was not a battle of swords, but of wills, of hearts, of the very essence of magic itself. The fate of Holofong, the fate of love itself, hung in the balance. The well, the curse's heart, began to glow. Epilogue. The battle raged, not with the clang of steel, but with the clash of wills, a tempest of raw magic that tore through the clearing, shaking the very foundations of Holofong. Kasha, empowered by the shield, fueled by her love for Rhys, by her connection to the valley, by the support of the Sylvans, faced the council, their ancient power a formidable force, their cold, white light a stark contrast to her warm, golden glow. Alara fought with a ferocity born of centuries of hatred, of pain, of a twisted loyalty to the council, her emerald energy lashing out like a venomous serpent, seeking to crush Kasha, to extinguish the light of the shield, to perpetuate the darkness of the curse. But Kasha held firm, her heart a beacon of hope, her spirit unyielding, her love for Rhys a shield that deflected Alera's attacks, a force that pushed back the darkness, a power that resonated with the very essence of the valley. The Sylvans fought alongside her, their forms shifting, their powers blending with the natural world, their ancient magic weaving a tapestry of protection, of healing, of resistance. They summoned the wind, the earth, the water, the very trees themselves, to aid Kasha, to weaken the council, to disrupt their control, to break the chains of the curse. The well, the heart of the curse, pulsed with a chaotic energy, its dark depths swirling with a vortex of power, a battleground for the opposing forces, a reflection of the struggle that raged within the clearing, within Kasha's heart, within the very soul of Holofong. As the battle reached its climax, Kasha realized that she could not defeat the council through force alone. The curse was too deeply ingrained, their power too ancient, their control too pervasive. She needed to find another way, a way to reach the source of the curse, to heal the wound that had festered for centuries, to break the cycle of hatred, of pain, of sacrifice. She focused her energy, her will, her love on the well, on the heart of the curse, on the memory of Arian, of Alera, of Rhys, of the kingdom that had been lost, of the love that had been betrayed, of the sacrifice that had been made. She saw, within the swirling depths of the well, a vision of the past, a moment of choice, a turning point in the history of Holofong. She saw Arian, young, powerful, filled with a righteous fury, facing the council, refusing their demands, choosing to unleash his power, to destroy the kingdom rather than submit to their control. She saw Alera, torn between her love for Arian and her loyalty to the council, her heart breaking, her spirit shattering, her mind twisting under the pressure, the manipulation, the cruel machinations of the ancient sorcerers. And she saw Rhys, witnessing the tragedy, the destruction, the loss, his heart filled with a profound sorrow, a desperate determination to protect the valley, to break the curse, to avenge his brother's death, to find a way to heal the wound that had festered for centuries. Kasha understood. The curse was not just a magical barrier. It was a wound, a trauma, a cycle of pain and sacrifice that had to be broken, not through force, but through healing, through understanding, through love. She reached out, her hand hovering over the well, her golden light merging with the chaotic energy, her love flowing into the darkness, a beacon of hope, a promise of healing, a testament to the power of forgiveness, of compassion, of a love that transcended time, space, and even death. She spoke, her voice resonating with the power of the shield, with the wisdom of the Sylvans, with the spirit of Rhys, with the very essence of Holofong. "I release you," she said, her words echoing through the clearing, through the valley, through the centuries. "I release you from your pain, from your anger, from your hatred. I release you from the curse." The well erupted with light, a blinding golden radiance that spread throughout the clearing, throughout the valley, throughout Holofong, dissolving the darkness, healing the wound, breaking the chains of the curse. The council vanished, their power dissipated, their control broken, their ancient forms dissolving into nothingness. Alera, her emerald glow extinguished, her face transformed, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock, relief, and peace, faded away, her spirit finally free from the torment, from the control, from the curse that had held her captive for centuries. The Sylvans rejoiced, their forms shimmering with a vibrant energy, their voices raised in a chorus of celebration, their ancient magic flowing freely, restoring the balance, healing the valley, bringing life back to the land. Kasha stood alone in the clearing, the golden light of the shield slowly fading, her body exhausted, her spirit drained, but her heart filled with a profound peace, a sense of accomplishment, a love that had triumphed over darkness, a destiny fulfilled. The valley was free. The curse was broken. Rhys's sacrifice had not been in vain. Years passed. Holofong slowly healed, the scars of the curse fading, the land returning to life, the people rebuilding their homes, their lives, their future. Kasha lived amongst them, not as a queen, not as a ruler, but as a friend, a protector, a healer, a living embodiment of the shield, a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness, of hope. She often visited the clearing, the place where Rhys had sacrificed himself, where the curse had been broken, where her life had changed forever. She would sit by the well, now filled with clear, sparkling water, reflecting the sky, the trees, the memories. And sometimes, when the light was just right, when the wind whispered through the leaves, when the valley held its breath, she would see him, a fleeting glimpse, a shimmering image, a golden glow in the depths of the well.
Rhys.
Watching over her, protecting her, loving her, still. And she knew, with a certainty that transcended time, space, and even death, that their love, forged in fire, tempered by sacrifice, strengthened by hope, would endure, forever, a beacon of light in the heart of Hollow Fong.
The end.